On the 6th of September, I put out a video covering this very strange shape in the ice that I've labeled TR3B Punch-Out. To my mind, it shows a location where a ship came out from underneath the ice sheet somehow, and then decided to go straight up, go ballistic, and punch through a thinner part of the ice, probably not even worrying about it, and left a very specific shape that described the ship itself. Now, I caught a lot of crap for this because people are like, well, it's just a random shape in the ice. That's very true. One random shape in the ice like this doesn't prove anything. Now, there was some secondary evidence, given that this is 2012. We go back a year, and we see absolutely no evidence of a melt shape like this whatsoever, and then all of a sudden, everything else around it stays frozen, but this random triangle just decides it wants to melt by itself. Now also, secondarily, off to the side here, we saw clearly what looked like pieces of the ice sheet over here next to an iceberg. And I theorized, postulated that perhaps there was back here, and we'll zoom out so we can see this. You see how there's an iceberg right here that's locked in this ice sheet? Well, maybe that iceberg, this particular one, was locked in the sheets here somewhere. This thing punched out. It sent this thing flying up into the air. It came down, caught the edge of this ice sheet, and as we see the jagged edges here, broke off these pieces, like you would basically breaking off the edge of a piece of glass. That this might be evidence. Now, of course, it's theory, it's speculation, but it's very suspicious. And like I said, one shape like this, in and of itself, isn't proof of anything. Now, what if I told you I found a second one? Literally identical to this one. Oh, believe it or not, I have found one. Now, it's really not on Antarctica. It's on an island off the coast of Antarctica. But as we can see, we have the exact same image. Now, this isn't a solid sheet of ice here. It looks like it's melting off. But we see literally almost identical shaping here, punched out through kind of a silty, dirty ice sheet. Once? Okay. You're right. That's not proof of anything. But two shapes like this? You see, the other question people had is, well, why would they punch through the ice? Why wouldn't they just go out into the water? Well, I'm making the allegation that perhaps these vessels might not actually be manned, and maybe they're automated, or those that are attempting to fly them and do this aren't really sure where exactly they're at, that perhaps they've been locked under that ice sheet for quite some time, and perhaps having recently awoken are attempting to find their way out. I have also made allegation, and this is all controversial, I know, but sometimes you have to be, that there is evidence of impact fracturing. Now imagine you're under this thick ice sheet and you've got this ship and you're used to, from your memory, being able just to fly wherever you want to, and then all of a sudden there's miles and miles of ice above you. Well, you might attempt to leave and impact ice that's too thick to go through. What type of evidence would that leave on the surface? You see, this is what I was alleging here, that these look like places where something from underneath has impacted heavily but not punctured, like someone on the other side of a door trying to punch their way through. That this looks like impact fracturing from underneath. And that would fall in line with what we saw with those two shapes, and things that people have seen in the skies, these triangular craft. I just don't think it's any accident that we see evidence for that. We have seen here in Florida all sorts of evidence of what they call USOs coming screaming up out of the water and out of the atmosphere faster than you can record it. So anyway, two different locations that have the exact same shape, and then we also have this as well. Now, I want to go someplace a little bit different, just to make a point that I think we've found evidence for something else as well. Now, over here, we have a place in Florida called the Fort Matanzas National Monument. It's not far from me, but the reason I'm here is that I've made the allegation in the past that if there were a civilization down here that was seafaring, they would have needed to have something akin to an intracoastal waterway. Of course, larger ships being docked out at sea, once they reach shallow water, have to take their goods and put it on smaller ships and then traverse the rivers to get access to the mainland, to the continent, the interior. And you can see this, all coastal states have this, from the Carolinas, basically the entire coast, all the way down here. Now, the reason I start here is that, well, A, I live here, and B, this is how the Spanish controlled this area militarily for hundreds and hundreds of years. Florida wasn't even part of the U.S. Revolution and maintained Spanish dominance and control all the way up to the Civil War. This is, of course, the north side inlet right here, and this is St. Augustine itself proper. And by controlling these two inlets with military posts, the Spanish basically controlled most of this region of Florida. One of the things that they used, let's see if I can find it here, to do so is the first masonry fort in the Americas built by anyone. It's called the Castillo de San Marco. It's basically just a tourist trap these days, but it's still there for a good reason. Nearly 500 years later. It has to do with what they built it out of and its location. So between there and Fort Matanzas, they control the intracoastal waterway of Florida. Jacksonville was a place called Fort Caroline, and it was controlled by the French. Now, the reason I mention that is it's important, because I want to show you guys something. As we zoom in here, this is Naval Station Mayport. As you can see, here's the natural inlet for the St. Johns River, and they've created this artificial port. And this is where carriers, destroyers, all sorts of things are docked. Now, this is, of course, the Google Earth web-based. We're going to go real quick to a place we've been before. One second. All right, now I've kind of poorly labeled this hidden ships. It's more like hidden islands. When you go to this part of Antarctica, and I'll zoom out real quick, there's a part where this strange canal is cut that goes right into the inlet here, into the Arctic Circle. Just so everybody has a frame of reference, we're down here. If this is, of course, 12 o'clock, this is 6 o'clock. What we're going to do is, instead of look at this straight down, we're going to use this technique that I've tried to show before, where you tilt the angle up as if you're looking at the horizon. And like I said, these are more than likely islands, not ships. It was just a, when I first found this, I just labeled it the first thing that came to mind. We're going to go clockwise along the coast here and see if we can find evidence of something like an intracoastal waterway. And as we do so, strange things will start to appear. The first thing we come along is this. But the farther we go, we we start to see stuff like this, which is very clearly. Now, to give you guys some scale here, this is about 3 miles long, this artificial port here. And you can see that there's even a smaller port right here. But this is where it really starts to get interesting. We start to see these smaller islands, and we also start to see submerged ones as well. And what looks like evidence of inlets and an intracoastal waterway system, where of course they would have conducted trade. And out here we can see evidence of other very suspiciously shaped islands as well, perfectly rectangular. I mean, this very much looks like, and the reason I showed you Mayport, this looks like ship docks. And places where larger craft and larger ships, seafaring ships, would have come to drop their goods off. Another submerged one here. Here we see 2 rectangular ones, another level, and basically 1, 2, 3 levels of canal here. And here, I mean, this straight up looks like a port. We have a major island here with what looks like some type of a port structure here. This looks like places where ships could have come and just swung around and, you know, berthed up and unloaded and then left. And like I said, at one time, the water level might have been very, very different. It's very, very, as we zoom out here, very reminiscent of what looks like an intracoastal waterway. And as we zoom out farther here, we can see the submerged deep water channels that larger ships would have necessarily needed. Here it's very, very apparent. Very shallow water, very deep water. And this was described in antiquity, I believe, by Plato. I mean, especially here. I mean, you can see very clearly that this, at one time, this was above water. These are deep water channels that show that more than likely this was a very advanced seafaring civilization. Now, as we come around here, we're going to stop here. Just to give you guys an example, right here, this is 7 miles long, this channel here. And this is about 2 miles. And it's half a mile wide, so this isn't an icebreaker that did this. And I'm going to show you historically, we're going to try to get the time slider up here, that this doesn't change in time. Now, as we can see, this is very circular, very suspiciously shaped. And then we have, of course, this channel, access to it. Now, naysayers would say that this is just a glacier. Well, glaciers are what? They're made of ice. You would think over time, the shape of this, especially out here, would change. Well, let's go back through time and let's see what we see. 2011. 10. 9. 8. 7. 6. 5. So we're back 8 years. The channel's identical, the shape is identical, everything around it has changed, and I could take you other places in Antarctica where you wouldn't even recognize it. It's changed so much from 2004 to 2012. very clearly an artificial structure. And once again, you won't find this unless you use a lot of different techniques. One is time. Another one is the layers, of course, that uncover in different detail, and perspective. Seeing things from a very different angle other than straight above, because, and I'll show this again, this is very easy to see from this angle, but if I tilt down, which is what a lot of people do, they take the default view of straight down, and I zoom up, the channel itself disappears. You can't even see it. It's gone. And all those structures that we just saw along the coast, all gone. Can't see anything. Completely hidden. And this is what they're counting on. This is exactly what they're counting on. People not taking the time to look at this closely. Because it's kind of hard to see, but down here in the lower right-hand corner, it starts to uncover a little bit, but the farther you go, the more it covers up. And like I said, this is an incredibly close zoom rate even here. This is usually where people stop when they start to look for stuff that's strange. So anyway, 16.5 minutes. I guess that's probably more than we normally go. But it's a very odd thing to see things that remind you of structures and places that you see in modern times. So I think this is just another piece to the puzzle that shows that at one time we had a very, very advanced seafaring civilization that lived here, and as this ice melts, there was a story out that I forget how many trillions of tons of ice that Antarctica has lost in the last 25 years. We're going to start to see more and more and more of this. And it would probably explain why the Chileans are modernizing their Antarctic bases, because there's probably a lot of things down here that no human eye has seen in thousands of years. So anyway, thank you guys so much for the support. I appreciate it. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.